Should be fine.
Okay, we are live. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone.
Wa alaikum salam.
How's it going?
Alhamdulillah.
Just gonna
Ramadan
double check.
Mubarak, everyone.
Yeah, Ramadan Mubarak.
Right.
We're just double checking we're live because, like I said, it's the first time doing this.
Yeah, 18 seconds live we are. 20
Cool.
seconds.
Alhamdulillah. So today's topic is apologetics. So I'm going to keep an eye on the chat. Do you guys got access to the chat as well?
Yes, we have.
Yeah, okay, cool. So if any questions, go for it, guys. So what I was going to say to kick this off, what you were actually, we were talking before we went live. So Yusuf, I was going to ask, what is apologetics to you? And I said, it's probably just defending Islam, but you said there's something more to that.
Yeah, it's defending Islam. It's going on the attack as well. So it's the back and forth, I guess. So you've got to kind of, you'll have different cliques. Certain people just focus on refuting people who attack Islam constantly.
Mm-hmm.
Brother Farid being one of the
I'm a defense guy. I'm a defense guy.
Yeah, but it's that's what I'm saying, isn't it? You're defending from people who spend all their time attacking Islam. And then you have other people that focus on critiquing atheism, critiquing Christianity, things like that. So there's a more complex thing to it than simply just defending Islam. But then I guess you can say sometimes a good defense is a good attack. So yeah, it's a bit of back and forth.
I quite like the analogy of we've all got cups of a drink, and I believe my drink is the best. You believe your drink's the best, but it's just not. So I'm going to have to empty your cup first, and that's the attack. And then so before I can fill yours.
Well, that's what atheists do, isn't it? Theirs is a completely negative critique, and they kind of leave you with a void, and then you've got to try and fill that void with other things. But yeah.
Well, you got to make it up yourself then.
Oh yeah, it becomes a creative endeavor at that point.
Yeah.
It seems like recently even Christians have been picking up on that, and their critiques against Islam have just been that, not even calling to Christ, not even calling to the Trinity, just let's bash Islam and hope for the best. Let's see what happens to these guys when we're done with them. I've noticed that trend recently.
Yeah, well, it's this is the thing with, like, I guess if you're just kind of leaving people with a void, they're saying nature abhors a void. It calls to be filled with something. People can't just live without any structure whatsoever to look at the world through. And this is why you see a lot of atheists now moving towards being somewhat spiritual. So, like, you see Sam Harris moving towards meditation, and even his book has a very religious appeal to it. It's got the rising sun on there, and yeah, they end up having to piggyback on other religions. You see it with a few of these ex-Muslims as well. Like they talk as if they're atheists, but then if you were to take a few of their videos, especially ones you've shared with me before, Farid as well, you would think that they were maybe Buddhists, or that they're leaning towards something. They're not leaning towards absolutely nothing.
Right.
And it's funny to watch.
I suppose when you get to a point where you decide there's no real ultimate truth, you're literally just making it up from there, aren't you? So so then it's just full emotion. It's just I'm doing what makes me feel good.
But it could be a bit of both. Like the existentialist philosophers, so like Sartre and that, they were basically saying that, because it started with Aristotle and the ancient Greeks, and they would say that there's this thing called essence, and essence is something that makes the thing what it is. And then they would say that the human being has an essence, and then that was popular for like centuries and centuries. And then the existentialists came along and they said, no, the human being doesn't have an essence. The human being begins to exist, and then it creates its essence at some point later on. And it kind of has to decide its own essence, and that it's burdened with freedom. But to me, that still sounds like an essence. They're saying there's something very unique about the human being. insofar as it has to choose how it wants to be. You know, like the bird doesn't have to think about whether it wants to be a doctor or, you know, whether it wants to get involved in Dawa. You know, it's just a bird. The bird does what it is. But then the human being has its own essence, which they would say is not an essence. But yeah, it's funny. And so it's this idea of like whatever you are is self-created. But that comes with its own problems. I don't think things that your essence is created as such, that or that meaning is created. It's more discovered in relation to things as you're kind of battling with yourself, who you are, your relation to the world that you're in. All of these kind of things. It's a bit of a weird.
What I love about you, Yusuf, is you get so deep. You get lost
too quickly.
It's alright, not a problem. But what I was going to say is, what got you guys? What made you decide I want to do? So I want to defend Islam, or I want to attack other ideologies. I want to do Islamic apologetics. What made you want to do that?
Go ahead, Farid.
Yeah, you haven't talked much.
I felt like there weren't enough people doing it. I always assumed that there was a lot of people doing it, and there seems to be an assumption that a lot of people do it. I was speaking to this brother in Dubai a while ago, and I was talking to about a website I was co-running. It mainly has to do with like Sunni Shi'a apologetics and whatnot, and he was like, "Oh, so one of the thousands?" And I was like, "What? What do you mean one of the thousands? There's like 4 or something." And so people just assume that there's a lot of that stuff going on, and there isn't. And I assumed there was a lot of that stuff going on, and there isn't. And what brought me onto this was AP, basically, Apostate Prophet, and his videos. And I watched a few, and I was like looking for refutations. I was like, "There's no refutations to this." And even though it's like it's really bad, but no one's bothering to respond to it. So that's how it started, basically. That's how it started for me.
Didn't you start with, I don't know if you want to go into it, but the Shia apologetics?
Yeah. I thought you guys were focusing on like Islam and whatnot.
Well, there's still a bit of apologetics in there, because obviously you're trying to guide towards the straight path with that still. Sure.
Well, that started off like in college. There's actually even before that, and growing up in Bahrain, Bahrain's like 50-50, a bit more. There's a bit more Shi'is and Sunnis in Bahrain. So it's natural growing up with them, having a lot of Shi'i friends growing up as a kid, getting some questions here and there, getting people pushing me to have doubts about my faith, and it pushed me into looking into it, and one thing led to another, and subhanAllah.
That surprised me well to find out Bahrain has a very large Shia population. I don't know why. I just assumed.
So when I was on a IERA New Muslim retreat course, and when I went, people from all around the world were there to learn how to do it, so they could take it back to their country. And there's this guy called Ali from Bahrain, and I was like, why do you need IERA there? Because I didn't understand there wasn't many although it's an Islamic country, a lot of people come to that country to work, and they're not Muslim. A lot of people there are Hindu, if I'm correct. So yeah, I was like, whoa, you got to do Dawa in Bahrain. Wow, subhanAllah.
Was it Ali Bishara by any chance?
I can't remember his second name. Maybe. Very humble, very nice, gentle guy. MashaAllah. Yeah, it might be.
Farid's got his links all over the place.
Yeah, mashallah.
It's a small country.
and it looks like you got a small population as well.
Yeah, it is quite small. 1,000,000-something, 1,500,000 or something.
How many?
1,500,000 or something.
That's I think London's bigger than that, isn't it?
Yeah, probably.
Subhanallah. But so with regards to there's someone in the comments. Where's that comment gone? No one is saying anything to Christian Prince and Samir. If Ustad, oh, that's not the one. Something about here we go. We as Muslims are lagging while Christians spend millions. because this is another thing as well. It's mainly a numbers game. Like for me, I think what we need is just trying to motivate people to get involved with it, you know, in refuting or watching these videos. And if you can get enough numbers in there, the talent will just kind of sieve through the numbers. Because if you've only got like 5, 6, 7 people getting involved, the chances that you're going to have anyone that's like massively effective out of that small number is very little. Whereas if you're getting like more and more people getting involved, there's going to be a few people who manage to clock what it is that you need to do to be efficient in this, you know, efficient in the Dawa, efficient in the apologetics, how to refute, what to look for, how to deal with certain claims. And for whatever reason, we just don't have them numbers at the moment. But, you know, inshallah, we're trying to kind of get that going a bit at the moment. We've got a few popping up. But another thing as well is this kind of fear of dealing with people. Because there's this constant trend of, you've probably had it as well, Farid, being critiqued for even approaching these refutations, for even like picking up.
Sure.
One of these things.
From all sides.
Which is a major issue because it's not like, you know, the youth aren't coming across this. Just simply searching Islam, even if you've got good intentions to begin with and you're just looking for particular people, the algorithms just start throwing these ex-Muslims at you.
If you type in the word like Islam into Google, like the first result or the second result is alislam.org, which is a Shi'a website.
No way.
Well, let me test that out now.
Yeah, me too. It must be different for everyone. We got Islamabad is my second.
Islam Wikipedia.
I think it might be Bahraini searches, maybe.
Maybe. Try Al-Islam.
I've got Britannica, BBC, religion, Islam.
Oh, you mean the second search or the second thing drop down?
No, just all of them.
Everyone on the chat, try it out. Go for it now.
Yeah, and let us know what you
share
find.
what comes up.
Let's see what I have.
You're right. Oh no, Ahmadiyya is the second one for Al-Islam.
Oh, okay. So it's for me. It's the first, and Ahmadiyya is the second.
Oh wow. Wow, that's amazing. It's probably because it's Al-Islam.
Maybe.
I don't know. So I was having a chat with Jordan this morning, and he said he's got a different opinion about apologetics, and he thinks, especially when doing videos refuting people, he feels that it might be actually giving them a spotlight rather than dampening that spotlight by showing that they're wrong. What do you think about that?
Punch up.
Go for it, Yusuf.
Yeah, no, I mean punch up. So don't punch down. Like if you're, we were speaking about this as well before. Like if you've got a small channel, and you're dealing with someone, like if you've got 10,000 subscribers and the person you're critiquing has got 100,000, you're hardly giving him a spotlight. He's already got it.
Yeah.
You know, he's got laser beams directed
100%. Yeah.
The issue is when you've got someone with like 100 subscribers reacting to like some small YouTube account that's got like 500 subs, then you are really putting a massive laser beam on them.
It usually doesn't happen, but there have been cases where that has occurred, where people who were relatively unknown, excuse me, not even relatively unknown, I'm just going to say it flat out, people who were completely unknown, and they've they didn't do too well in a debate, but they just did fine. They stood their ground in the debate, and that was it. They blew up, man, and they became like superstars because they stood face to face with someone that has been doing it for a while, someone that has a name. That's it.
I suppose. I remember when I first saw your videos, Farid, when it was a prostate apostate prophet. But yeah, I remember because, like I said, I've talked to a lot of people that have come to Islam that have a lot of struggles, and it is those arguments that come up, because one of the things is when you are intellectually convinced of Islam but not emotionally convinced, you try to disprove that intellectual, that intellectual search that you did. Yeah, grounding. So you try and disprove it, and then when you start doing that, that's the first thing you find is Christian prints and all that sort of stuff. So I think it's really important actually what you guys are doing, mashallah. Even if it is obvious. Sorry.
One of the major things, and you'll get this as a revert as well, there's a massive pressure not to be a Muslim. Like, especially if you're from like a white background, you're from, a secular Western world, and you've not got that many Muslims around you. To accept Islam is to completely turn your life upside down almost. You have to reconfigure everything you do. You have to stop hanging around with certain people. And not just that, you've got to deal with the fact that the major idea of Islam that's quite popular in Western countries is not a very good one, especially if you're from like a council estate background where people can generally tend to be quite right wing or and so it's this idea of obviously if you've become convinced that Islam is the truth, you believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you believe that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is the prophet, that can be a bit scary, because then you instantly start anticipating the criticisms that you're going to get for accepting this, for changing your lifestyle, for becoming different. The issue is obviously if you really do sincerely believe that, that to not like submit to it, to not make that change is massively inauthentic, and you feel it, and so that causes a tension in you, and then you have to go about justifying your decision not to submit to it, and then this is where obviously floating towards people who critique Islam and just kind of submitting to things they say, even if what they've said is based in a lie or a misinterpretation or a twisting of certain things, trying to push a particular narrative, you just kind of latch onto that just for the sake of being able to feel justified in not submitting to something that you consider to be true.
I think all your peers do it as well, because they don't want you to be Muslim. I remember when I started practicing again, one of my mates spent a day just researching why Islam is wrong, because he wanted to go out drinking with me still, and that was the reason. It wasn't because it was like and what sites did he come across? What do you reckon? You know what I mean? All those. I remember also early days when I first accepted Islam, when in the Dawa there was the scientific miracles and stuff. I was going, this is amazing, the Big Bang, whoa, showing my mates, and then someone just went right, and I can't remember what website it was, but it was like a list of unscientific things apparently in the Quran and stuff, and it just made me go, whoa. And it was that journey of going, whoa, there's loads of material, anti-Islam material, but when you look at it, it's only a little, it's not thick, it's easy to dispute just by looking, but a lot of people don't have the access to look, especially those that don't have the Arabic language. That's why I'm trying to learn it, because I want to be able to access all that volumes of information. That's not, inshallah, that's not, it's going to be years, man. It's so hard. So there's so much knowledge out there, and I think we need more ulama to step up and do a bit of this as well. Some like people with a lot of knowledge. What do you guys think?
What about you, Farid?
Definitely, Annie, definitely. I wish more ulama would get involved. Unfortunately, it seems like the language barrier is the main issue. There are a lot of students of knowledge that go to Medina and Mecca and wherever, and they come back to wherever they're from, and sadly, they don't do what they're supposed to. They feel like this stuff is, I don't know, overwhelming them, or the usual thing I hear is, hey, I just like the spotlight. I don't want to be famous or something like that, as if your first video is going to go viral because you refuted some random video online. So there definitely needs to be more people. I think most sincere Muslims don't like the spotlight. I was very hesitant to start doing this stuff. I have been active for a while, but like just by name. and then slowly it became voice, and then video. Abu Layth dragged me out, so here I am.
Is that what it was?
Yeah, Abu Layth dragged me. He was making fun of me. He was like, oh, this guy's doing a video in the dark. You know how he is.
But I think I was first exposed to you with the videos you did on Tawhidi. That was ages ago as well. Because that guy was someone who absolutely infuriates me. Or he is someone who infuriates me. And I don't know, there just wasn't much going on in terms of like dealing with him. And then I kind of stumbled upon yours. And then I was watching as you developed, and then I saw you started your own channel. And then, I think I clocked onto that straight away. And the first video you did, was it the one to do with Islam in India or something?
I think so. Probably. It was one of his best videos. I mean, views-wise, a lot of views for absolutely no reason. But you see that the issue with that is that his content, have some. Like, the guy's so irresponsible. That video could lead to bloodshed. Probably did lead to bloodshed, man. It's crazy.
Which one in particular? The
video about India. That video about India.
How would it?
Comments, man? Because it's so his idea for what he's arguing in the video is that Islam teaches that the Muslims are going to invade India and all that. And this is actually a prophecy that occurred like 1,000 years earlier. It's something that's done. But now he's pushing it as if it's going to happen now. It's going to happen today. It's going to happen anytime.
Which makes me panic.
Yeah. And of course, Hindu nationalists and whomever, they're reacting to this thinking, oh my God, these Muslims are crazy and they're going to start attacking. And some Muslims are going to be watching this content. They're going to be thinking, oh yeah, this is a prophecy and we're going to have to try to fulfill it, not knowing this is something that has been fulfilled like 1,300 years earlier. So it's quite irresponsible. It's
funny as well, because a lot of these ex-Muslims or just atheists in general, the Hindu nationalists absolutely love them. Like they thrive off them, and obviously they must be quite large in number. What is it? Over 1 billion people in India at the moment. Yeah. Quite a large number.
Yeah.
But I'm still trying to get my head around why they would be so in favor of atheists, because it's not like that helps their religion or their cause in any way necessarily. If anything, it undermines it.
100%.
Because hatred seems to blind people sometimes. They just kind of make these strange alliances.
I don't know much about Hinduism. I heard that to a lot of people, it's just their own philosophy of life. It's not something that they're that attached to in the way other people are attached to their own religions. But Allahu Alam, I don't know. Do excuse me, Hindus, if I'm misrepresenting Hinduism, but that's what I've heard.
But it's quite, there's all the Islamophobes band together. Yeah, that's pretty much the case. With Hinduism, it's quite a creative religion. Like it's hard to pin it down in anything. Like with any one particular thing, like you have hard polytheism, soft polytheism. So you have some of them that believe all of the gods in Hinduism are expressions of the same one god. And you have other with the hard polytheists who say no, each and every god in Hinduism isn't a distinct being. And then it depending on where you go, it's not like everyone in India all worship all of them gods. Like you go to certain regions and they'll worship a particular god here. You go to another region, they'll worship another particular god there. It's quite chaotic. It's hard to I don't think anyone has like the head around Hinduism completely. Like, there's just too much going on there. I don't know, how many gods do they have? Is it like?
Well, when you believe that God is everywhere and in everything, then I think what their idea is that the divine aspect are concentrated into something like particular, so then you can venerate it. I think that's the idea. So there's thousands of gods.
Donald Trump's one now, isn't he?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I saw that.
He's added to the pantheon.
Mental. Absolutely.
Radvan as well, yeah? You've seen that?
Oh yeah,
What?
yeah. Radvan.
Someone was like, if you do this or that, I'll worship you. And so,
It only takes one guy as well, and then
yeah.
they're in it.
Subhanallah.
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird one.
This is very similar with a lot. Like when I read about the pagan Arabs at the time of the Prophet, peace upon him, it's almost like that as well. It's they need a god for everything to give them fortune and so on. I don't understand it, because I was an atheist before, so that's it. Well, far fetched. That's going too far to me. So like, yeah, I just don't get it. Alhamdulillah.
Well, it seems to be something that kind of develops from because there's really good videos with Brother Jerry, the Irish revert.
Yeah,
he did some with Ayero. He's talking about like the origins of monotheism, and you see this kind of common theme of monotheism throughout pretty much. You find traces of it in all religions, and then I guess it's just you kind of have this desire to understand the divine more, and so you kind of try to express it with stories and things like that. But then these kind of develop in strange ways and start becoming distinct things. Or like you said there, they might make a story about God in bodily form doing something in particular. That becomes one God, and then they start telling a story about God doing something else. But the story is quite distinct and unique, and so it ends up expressing itself in this weird way. Although it starts with an original monotheistic underpinning, different people approaching the same thing creatively in their own way gives rise to these like mad variety of expressions. And then
that's sorry, go on.
Oh, go on.
I was just going to say that's one of the reasons I accepted Islam as well, is that I saw that same theme within different like classic and ancient religions, and that even little things like the Djinn, like what the Djinn are and stuff, and you can see that folk tale in all different cultures, and it's the same sort of attributes. Subhanallah, it's amazing. But yeah, go on, carry on, bro.
I got into the whole Djinn thing. The Djinn thing was easily absorbable by me because I was always into this idea of aliens and things like that. And in my atheist days, I became convinced that if we were ever to be visited by any sort of alien, that it would be more likely that it would be an extra dimensional being than extraterrestrial.
Were you watching David Icke lectures? Is that what it was?
No, this was before David Icke was that popular, to be honest. So this was years ago. This was back in the days of the Arrivals.
Oh wow, subhanallah.
If any of you remember that, did you ever see any of that?
I did, yeah.
Wow. Farid, do you remember the Arrivals?
I'm familiar with it. I haven't watched it now.
But this was like, how old was I then? It was over 12 years ago. Maybe 13, 14 years ago. It was a bit ago. But it was just this idea that like a living being would find it very hard to kind of travel across large distances. But that if there are other dimensions, that it'd be much more likely that they'd figure a way of kind of communicating across them. And then that idea just kind of seemed to meld quite easily with the idea of Djinn. As Jinn are described as these beings that can see us when we can't see them. They live in a world kind of parallel to ours almost. And and so like that just stuck with me. And it kind of developed from there. It was interesting. But do you ever read through the comments? There's quite a lot going on. I'm just neglecting.
Yeah, I keep going back and forth, and like as normal, it's like its own little chat room, really.
I saw someone like saying that he'd like to get married, and someone else shutting him down, saying that this isn't a place for that.
Brilliant. I love it. I love the comments, man. It's hard actually. So it's hard being a host because I get sucked into them. So when I've been on streams in the past, I've had like been a guest and I've been just watching the comments and like wanting like what are you saying, and then yeah, what do you think, Ben? I'm like, what?
Yeah,
that's it's really hard. Sorry,
split your attention between the two of them is really difficult.
It's very difficult.
And if you don't,
sorry, go on. I was just going to say when I was on Sabur's channel, it was the first time I actually went on someone else's channel. That's not like the EFDawah guys, and I was like, right, this is real serious now. I was really nervous. So I was looking at a blank screen. I turned my monitor off for a good like 10-15 minutes because I knew I'd get distracted so easily at the comments, and then I just didn't look at them. It's really hard. But my job now is to look at them and pick out things. So Allah make it easy for me. What are you going to say, bro? Sorry, I keep interrupting. Not very good.
The trick is to zoom in.
Okay.
Zoom in on the screen so that you can't see the comments. If you need to hide them anyway. See, obviously not now.
Seems like someone just paid to ask you a question, Yusuf.
I heard you guys denounce presuppositionalism in a refutation to Solid Rock Man. Why doesn't it apply to Islam? I guess you could be a presuppositionalist Muslim. It's not impossible. So it's not that it doesn't apply. It's just that it was incorrectly applied to us. Because he's basically, what happened was Mr. Solid Rock Man, he was just making the assumption that we were just presuppositionalists, that we begin all of our arguments based on the belief that Islam is true, and then we move from that. But I don't know, it was weird because he was neglecting that myself being a revert that was an atheist. It doesn't make sense to say that I began with the assumption that Islam was true. I had to develop into accepting Islam.
That's why I think reverts doing Dawa is really good because of that. Because a lot of atheists' thought is that if you're religious, you have got that presupposition. So
there's the handicap in it. If you're born into the religion, it's harder for people to take you seriously because they just assume that he was born into it. Why? Of course he's defending it. He's got his bias. Is this? Is that? But for people like me and you, Ben, if we've come into it from not believing, it's not as simple as saying that we're presuppositionalists. There's more to it than that. For me, it was spending a lot of time reading the Quran. I read it several times before I became a Muslim. Looking into like the critiques that were being put forward, like finding that a lot of them were very badly put together, or just kind of weird twisting of things and really trying to emphasize on really weak points, looking into the life of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and then really looking at this historical character and trying to understand whether or not I thought he was a liar, whether he was crazy, or whether he genuinely believed in the message that he was propagating. And for me to say anything other than that he genuinely believed in what he was doing, it just gave rise to so many more issues than it solved. And so like eventually accepting that, he believed what he was saying. The Sahaba certainly believed what he was saying as well. And then just how it kind of transformed their character and how they, the kind of people they became, and then how successful that whole system that he gave became. Like it gave rise to one of the biggest empires in such a short period of time. They were like in the Iberian Peninsula, they were as far as China in the opposite direction. It was like in the blink of an eye. And like 1 minute you've just got these people that live in the desert, that are just fighting each other and having poetry battles and like they're not empire builders. One person comes along, he gives them a book, and all of a sudden they're empire builders. It's like it is to kind of boil it down to a fluke just seems absurd to me.
But if you believe the universe was a fluke, then that's easy to believe it's a fluke.
Yeah, I guess. Assalamu alaikum, Imran. Is he good?
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers. How are you doing? You okay?
Alhamdulillah.
How you doing?
Apologies, I literally just got back from work, and I thought I'd, if you allow me to join in with you guys, mashallah.
Yeah, of course.
Of course, of course.
I was always wondering as well. Do you remember me from MMU by any chance? You came to my uni.
Yes, of course. We met a lot of brothers, mashallah, and I think you do look familiar, but I thought you were familiar because I've seen you on YouTube. So
we met before I was not even on YouTube. You came to my uni to do the talk.
Wow,
mashallah.
Yeah, and the three of you did your talk, and I and Brother Mustasin, the gentleman that runs.
Yes, I do remember you, mashallah. Yes.
He kind of shuffled me in to have a debate with Hamza.
Yes, of course. Now I remember you exactly. Alhamdulillah, mashallah, bro. I think you've mashallah come on leaps and bounds from that in terms of prominence in Dawah and stuff. So mashallah.
Yeah, I think it was the second year then at that time. I didn't even have social media at that point until I left.
When was that then? It must have been like 2 years ago. No, it can't be.
Maybe 2 years ago.
Oh, wow. Was that the one you recorded, Imran? And
yes,
put on the channel?
That's on our channel.
Oh, subhanallah.
It's in 2 parts, so you can see.
I remember when you went. Yeah, check it out, guys.
You didn't upload it till a bit after, though. I remember. But I think I'm on there asking a question right at the end. At some point during the Q&A.
Mashallah, we'll have to highlight that and put your name on there and say the beginning,
Yusuf Ponders before he was pondering soul.
But Mother, if I could just ask, so you guys, mashallah, very inspiring work. And I think right in the beginning, I was sort of had the stream running in the background when I was getting changed and stuff. And there was this thing about there's an overwhelming amount of anti-Islamic propaganda that's out there that's so readily, anything innocuous about Islam, like as Brother Farid was saying, the vast majority of the hits you're going to get on page 1 are going to be anti-Islamic. Yeah. And I think in terms of that overwhelming number of anti-Islamic websites, what made you guys pick the ones that you went for? Was it just prominence? Or was it that the arguments were so ridiculous that this is sort of a not low-hanging fruit, but so easily refutable that it's just worth doing these very short, snappy, to-the-point videos that would completely undermine the argument? What was your sort of rationale for picking these different people?
Farid, that's aimed at you. Like my videos are always 10 hours long.
It's definitely the bigger channels. Sometimes because subhanAllah, like look at Samir's video, the one about why I left Islam, right? That video has over 1 million views, and that video affected people. If you go to his website, you have people saying, I left Islam after watching that video. And you watch that video and there's really not much there. The arguments aren't as well thought out or presented. Doesn't provide references to anything. He just, mumbles for 10 minutes and that's it. Video goes viral because he was smart enough to pick a smart title, right? And subhanAllah, that was it. I mean, that video needed to have a response, even though there was nothing there. And sometimes you will have like criticisms against Islam that are better thought out than the stuff that Samir puts out, or the stuff that CP puts out, and the stuff that anyone of these guys put out. And simply because of perhaps the amount of information, or the way it's presented, or the level of the information itself, it goes over people's heads and no one watches it. So it doesn't affect anyone because no one watches it. So yeah, that's why my priority is just to focus on what's causing people issues, and a lot of the times it's not even the arguments. So people contacted me saying, hey man, refute CP, expose CP, and all that, and I'd watch the stuff and I was like, what do you want me to respond to? There's like hundreds of hours of content. What do you want me to respond to? And it turns out it wasn't anything. There was no one particular point that people wanted me to respond to. It was just this guy is lying about Islam, expose him for the liar that he is. And I was like, okay. And that was it.
Yeah, he was more of an entertainer than anything, CP, isn't he?
Yeah.
That's the thing. A lot of people are enticed by character and being entertained. And the entertainment is fueling their already hatred towards something, or their idea that they already have. It fuels that because of his character, and that's what it is. Yeah, I was surprised because I heard they had a book out, and I heard look, this argument he's got, and I watched one. I was like, what is this?
Yeah.
I couldn't watch it, man. SubhanAllah.
It's terrible.
We live in a weird. Go on, sorry.
So some of the worst writing I've ever come across. Easily. And that's about. I'm not even talking about the strength of his arguments. The grammar is all out of place. Like sometimes there's like terrible punctuation. It's just a huge mess. And I was like, how could anyone find this? And there were some comments. I believe in the reviews. Some people were like, "What the hell is this?" You know, and some of them were like, "Oh, CP, we love you, CP, no matter what you do." So you have that to deal with.
One of the issues we have as well is one of the things that people kept putting towards me is, listen, the average attention span of the modern human being is like 9 seconds. So if you don't have them within the first 9 seconds, you've lost them. I was like, 9 seconds? What can I say to like grab people's attention in 9 seconds? But I think a lot of these entertainers, or the anti-Islamic entertainers, they're good at kind of just throwing things at you and getting your attention in 9 seconds, and then just kind of giving you like a little bit of a song and a dance. And one of the biggest issues is how, I guess, lazy people have come when it comes to like looking into this. So they'll hear a refutation, it'll unsettle their hearts. They'll get dead nervous and they're like, oh my God, is this true? And then they'll have to kind of start looking into it. But some of these issues, they're not easy to kind of get all of the information on them. And it takes patience a lot of the time and like a lot of reading, and like you might come across like 20 different articles on the same thing with all these different opinions and trying to measure which one's like a solid opinion, which one's not, which one's got like a dodgy agenda. And that takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of patience, but people don't have that. And so what they'll do is they'll hear the refutation, they'll get so far, they get bored, or they get sick of looking into it, and they'll just stop there. But rather than kind of stopping there with the assumption that, well, I've not completed my search, they'll stop there with the assumption that the thing that they were looking into in the first place was correct. And so they just kind of adopt this doubt out of laziness, like out of just the sheer lack of patience of kind of having to go through the rigmarole. Because a lot of Farid, you'll know this as well, like, and same with Imran as well. When it comes to dealing with refutations, a lot of the research is really boring. Like a lot of it's just sifting through nonsense to try and pick out or find the truth in like. So I guess like mining for diamonds, isn't it? You got to head through loads of dirt to get to like.
Yeah.
But, sticking with your 9 second attention span rule, we have another phenomena, which is almost the flip side of the phenomena you're describing. In this, there are some people who they see something that's negative about Islam, and maybe their Iman is affected by this slightly, or they're undisturbed by this. And one of the things that they can do is just type in the allegation and type in the word response or rebuttal. And if they see that this has been rebutted, it doesn't really matter to them. They don't have the time. They haven't got the time to put in the research and understand all the gritty. But the fact that they see, okay, someone has responded to this argument, for them, that restores them back to a place of tranquility. So that sort of almost sounds like I'm taking away from all the effort that goes in, because you're absolutely right. It takes a lot of research. It takes a lot of, if you don't have this knowledge to hand anyway, to find out how to structure your argument and look at the weak points. And, the people who look into your video fully and understand it all and absorb it are probably going to be very few. Most people are going to be eating their breakfast or having their lunch whilst they're, got their headphones in on the way to work, whatever it might be. Just having brothers responded and alhamdulillah, they feel better already. So I think there is that side to it as well. And the fact that there's so much anti-Islamic stuff, if there is just enough responses or attempts at responses, or even that title is in there with the word response somewhere, a lot of people will feel reassured with that. But I think I made 4 videos in responding to CP's videos about 12 or 13 years ago. And all he did was he simply he shut that video down that I responded to and moved it to somewhere else. And
no way.
Just completely did that. So 2 or 3 times this happened. So after in those 4 videos. So then I sort of stopped because I thought it's like the Hydra, you chop off one head and another head comes out somewhere else. And
that's his tactic, isn't it? He doesn't keep his videos on. Like he'll leave them on, tell everyone to download them. He'll take them off and then tell everyone to upload it elsewhere. Like upload it to
no way.
Yeah.
Really?
I think it's because he doesn't want to get banned or something.
Oh, okay. I suppose, guys,
stuff he comes out with.
You, after doing this, have you been contacted by anyone that had what had the view? Let's say CP fan. Have they come to you and go, tell us a bit about that? What's happened with that?
Alhamdulillah. I've had a few people saying, okay, we admit that he's a liar, which is great, but Islam is still wrong, which is fine. I mean, you can have that view as long as because my purpose usually, and most of my clips, is just to prove that he's a liar. Some of them just don't care though. They're like, okay, he's a liar, but and some of them were completely. It seemed like they turned around. It seemed like they've completely turned around. I'm not saying anyone accepted Islam from my videos. My intention from those videos isn't to bring anyone to Islam, because I'm not really even making an argument for Islam. I'm just refuting his content or exposing him for lying. But yeah, there have been a few people. Some of them are hardcore fans. So I'm really glad. Some of them, there's one person who was like, I've been watching his stuff for 10 years and I thank you for showing me that this guy is lying. Is indeed
10
lying.
years.
Yeah.
Somehow I could barely deal with.
But imagine you've given your heart to this person, 10 years of being a fan and having the guts to swallow that. No, it was wrong.
The CP T-shirt and that, and
CP
poster on the wall.
It actually is. It must be hard psychologically to, even if seeing that he's false or he's a liar, to then go, yeah, he is lying, and let go of that, because you must have the comfort of listening to someone that you've listened to for 10 years. I know people that listen to podcasts, that there's hundreds of them, and they listen to them before. And this isn't just about anti-Islam, just anything, a character to listen to, and it becomes a part of your life. And then to have to shut that off because you think that, mashallah, that's a really good thing to do. I think
I have it in front of me. I could read it out to you guys if you guys like.
Please do, yeah.
Bismillah.
So he says, this is someone called Destiny K, who wrote out, this is not easy to write, and I hate to admit it, but I am honestly done with Christian Prince. I am a long-time fan of him since 2010, and you are right. Now, when I pay close attention to his videos, I realize his dishonesty, whereas before I would believe everything he says and thought he could never be defeated. And it's a lengthy comment.
Has any of them have you followed up with any of them at all? Maybe.
No, I haven't.
No.
It's just a random person who comments in the comments, and I'm like, I haven't. Yeah. Wow. It makes my day. It makes my day.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And that's really inspiring, mashallah, because there was a brother who I know, and Ben knows as well. Actually, we know the brother quite well, and he was very much into. For some reason, he became very much interested in the polemics against Islam very early in his Islam, and he literally all the arguments were simply just regurgitations of sleepy arguments. And when I spoke with him, he actually had the book. So what we did was we spent, I think, a year and a half. We went through every single argument that he presented in the book, just in a private conversational style. And we demonstrated that either it was a straight lie, it was misrepresentation, or just the thing that he was trying to make it say wasn't exactly what was happening. And in every single case, it was that strategy that Either he was lying directly, so he would completely make something up. It wasn't anywhere with a reference, but you couldn't find the reference when you looked for it. The other interesting thing was, or he would refer to sites that were only in Arabic language. So for Westerners who were reading these, it's an English book. For Westerners who were reading it, they couldn't check the reference. Or he would always try and insinuate something was happening when it actually wasn't happening. And I think those three things were probably, every single argument was like that. And in the end, although the person said, yeah, he's a liar, absolutely, we're going to, we'll make a barbecue out of this book, for alhamdulillah. But still, I think there was some sort of pull, because I think those are if you have something in your heart, some doubts, anything that will sort of stick to that and strengthen it for you, if you're pondering and you're not sure. These things are quite powerful, which is why people can't let go, I think. So
we mentioned
when I hear comments like that, alhamdulillah, it's very inspiring, mashallah. Jazakallah Khair for your efforts.
Well, me and Ben were talking about this at the beginning, weren't we? We were saying that, like, sometimes having to kind of become a Muslim can kind of be such a burden for someone that lives in a predominantly non-Muslim area. Everyone around them is non-Muslim, not just non-Muslim, but anti-Islam. Like their opinion of Islam is that it's X, Y, Z. And so having to kind of accommodate this belief system in your life and become Muslim and represent Islam where you're like completely outnumbered, people will latch onto these things just as a reason to kind of let go of something they believe in or something that they've inclined towards. Like that they have to do whatever they can to escape the burden of having to do dawah, I guess, or to represent Islam in an area.
Alhamdulillah, you're absolutely right. I think mashallah, we try and do a lot of work at EFDawah with reverts after the shahada, because that's usually the time when you need to sort of nurture and help put people in touch with each other. It's not that we do anything specific in terms of training or anything. It's really getting people to try and have the journey of learning together.
Yeah.
So when they come across things that are difficult, or they come across particular situations, the other reverts may have been in a similar situation, and they can provide their own experience, and that usually helps the person somehow find a way through their particular challenge.
I think it also preempts if someone else on that group would come across this, so just get it out of the way and deal with it. Yeah, alhamdulillah.
But one of the biggest issues with reverts is they become, is it the hadith about the stranger? Like they feel a stranger to everyone. They don't fit in anywhere. They can't fit in with their old community because they're the Muslim. No one else is the Muslim. They can't feel like they fit in too much with the new community because it's all majority, say, Pakistani, like in my area in particular. All the Muslims are just generally elderly Pakistani men. And so, like, if you go into the mosque, there's not much going on there, and you constantly feel like an outsider no matter where you are, whether you're with the Muslims, whether you're with the non-Muslims. You feel like you just stand out like a sore thumb, and this can feel quite isolating for a lot of reverts, and it can cause them to feel lonely, and that loneliness itself is something that they that motivates them to let go of the religion, just simply because.
That's why a lot of reverts flock to online and come to these sort of streams and join Discord servers and so on like that, because their community becomes an online community rather than a physical community, which is a phenomenon. It's different, isn't it?
It's not sufficient. An online community, it doesn't cut it.
No, it doesn't.
People need face-to-face interaction. It's like I used to work in call centers a lot. One of the things they constantly had to emphasize was the fact that like 95% of something stupid, a very large percent of the communication between human beings is visual. And so it's picking up on like hints and cues from the facial expressions and hand gestures and this, that, and the other. And when you're on the phone, all of that is gone. And so you have to overcompensate an extraordinary amount with just the noise of your voice. And then if you think, Discord or just chats, you've taken off, like, I don't know what percent you're left with if you're just dealing with community via chat. writing.
I think so. One of the things as well is a lot of reverts, especially in the early days when they become a Muslim, they have a double life where they've got this my life before. I've still got my old friends, and still go to the same job, and I still hang out and go to cinema with my old friends and that. And then my Muslim life is this other thing. And having an online community doesn't help that split, because eventually what a revert will do is they'll stop that double life, and it'll be fully Muslim, if you like, so to speak. And instead of they and it doesn't help having an online only community, but it's better than nothing. Because imagine, mashallah, the revert brothers that revert to Islam in the 90s, for example, or earlier, and they didn't have the support that we do now. They didn't have dawah tables to go to or whatever. But so it is a blessing, alhamdulillah. It's a blessing.
Definitely. Well, it's better than nothing. And
but it's something that we can work towards now.
But it's an important step. So like if you can get people to organize online, which is why I did a video recently about like enlivening the Discord community, because it feels like with all the other communities, with the atheist community, with the Christian community, like so much money is being pumped into making these kind of things successful. They have massive ad campaigns. They have they had campaigns on buses at one point talking about, oh, God probably doesn't exist. Emphasis on the word probably. And like we've said before, like even when you're searching for, Islam on YouTube, you've got other websites being pushed up to the top. And this is done by paying for search engine optimization. You pay Google ads to like top you, or you pay someone who's trained in SEO to help get your website sorted in a particular way. And there's a thing or a common theme where when you're talking to certain Muslims, they think that they've got this idea that basically anyone who's involved in dua or anyone who's doing dawah, that you're going to have hyper efficient da'i by also spending, say, 50 hours a week working a job and then doing dua part time here and there on the side. Whereas when you've got like these atheists, these Christian apologetics, they have massive like Patreon accounts where they're getting God knows how much money, and they dedicate their lives to doing their own, their atheist dawah or their Christian dawah. And there is a lot getting funded in to them so that they can dedicate their lives to it. And because they can dedicate lives to it, they become efficient at it. They become, they get a hang of the rhetoric. They get a hang of ways of kind of leading crowds in one direction or the other. And we have this opposite thing when it comes to Muslims and with Islam, because you have this idea that, it should all be free. But then basically what we're saying is that all of our dua basically should do it part-time, which means that, they're not going to be as hyper efficient as people who are dedicating their whole lives to it, which is an issue.
That's a great point, mashallah. And I think that's it's so profound. I just want to sort of we can emphasize that a little bit. So if you could, Brother Farid, if you could tell me, for example, what's your week like? In a week, what are you doing in terms of
since Corona?
So you could do it either way. So normally, what you would do
outside of Ramadan as well.
Outside of Ramadan,
non-Ramadan,
and in
non-Corona.
terms of your time that you dedicate to dawah, how do you make for that? And so we get an idea of what's a week like for you.
Alhamdulillah, even though I do have a lot of free time because I work with family. So due to that, I can dedicate a good chunk of time for this. Even sometimes when I'm at work, I'll have some headphones in, listening to some idiot talk trash about Islam. So I have the opportunity to make the best of my time like that. I'm sure it's harder for others.
What about you, Yusuf? What's your week like? Non-Corona, non-Ramadan week?
Well, I finished uni last year, and then I had to kind of sign up to the job centre and start looking for a job. But then they said, well, we can do like the self-employed thing if you want. You just got to write a business plan. And so I wrote the craziest business plan I could think of. I was like, I'll make a YouTube channel. I'll start a website. I'll write a book about nihilism. And then I gave them, I didn't think they were going to take it seriously, but for whatever reason, they did. I don't know. So now I'm trying to make a YouTube channel. This business plan managed to work. And,
well, alhamdulillah, it's working, but it does sound like you dodged it. You're like, yeah, I'm just going to do that, and now it's working.
Well, it was something I had a desire to do. It was like, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do what I want. And so I was like, it sounds weird, like as if the job center are going to be like willing to let me not look for work so I can do a YouTube channel. But I grew up when YouTube was just something people would just upload cat videos to, like it was just random. There was nothing about YouTube that screamed career. Like it was a very obscure platform, and I guess I'm still in that old mindset, I guess, where YouTube still sounds like a weird thing to me. But really? Well, I'm 30 odd now, aren't I? So
spring chicken, mashallah.
Yeah, mashallah. But so most of my days at the moment are spent trying to organize myself, thinking about what I want to do material on. I've got about 1 million things that I want to do. Like I've got a few ideas for different Discord servers, one specifically for Dua. It's basically like an improved version of the WhatsApp group chats, to do with like Dawa or refutations in particular, where we can have particular groups and channels for certain individuals. Where I don't know, so just things like that. Trying to do a lot of reading, because the book that I want to write on nihilism, my reading list is quite large, and the books are quite long and tedious, so just trying to get through them at the moment as well, while trying to produce content, while trying to make the job center happy, because they set me targets every 3 months. I'm about halfway through now, so I think I'm 6 months through of my 1 year off. So if I get to the point where I can be self-sufficient after a year, then they'll just kind of let me loose into the world. If not, then I'll have to search for a job. So it's basically at the moment just trying to knuckle down, make something of this, while not getting too caught up and polluting my intention. Obviously, because the primary goal here is the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's just trying to not let this goal that the job center has set me pollute that too much. Although they're emphasizing that more than the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because they're not Muslim, I guess. So
alhamdulillah. So I think that's really, it's fascinating to see the change in the perception of the vehicle of YouTube between the years. So I'm from that generation where, like, why are you watching videos on the internet? What's the point of this? It literally was, in fact, when I did my first degree, there was no internet. I had to physically go in and get my references and myself for the dissertation that I wrote. But things have completely changed. So if you were to, I think you guys are almost like an exception to that in that question, because mashallah, Brother Farid is works with family, relatively free and able to work listen to arguments even at work, and you're mashallah very similarly focus. You're YouTube orientated in the sense of trying to further that and make that your main thing that you do. If you contrast it with the EFDawah group, and that's because I know most of the brothers there, and even if you look at most of the brothers at Speaker's Corner, they're usually all holding down full-time employed work, so that not that they have their own businesses, but they're working for someone else. I'm a medic, so I'm literally between 40 and 60 hours a week. I'm doing other stuff. On top of that, there's always you always have to keep your knowledge up to date as far as you can, and particularly in coronavirus times, every single day there's an update on what we know and what's changed, and how the management would be affected by that. So you have to try and do all this, and then usually it's it's either when everyone else is asleep. So all my kids are sort of head to bed now. So I'll quickly turn this on and I'll have a go. Or I'm digging into something that would be considered family time to do that. And I think that's probably for the last 10, 15 years when I've been doing stuff in Dawah. It's probably been the way. But I think the new wave is going to be much more like the way Yusuf Mashallah is headed, in that this is something that if you are, like you said before, it's not about numbers, it's also about impact. If you are one of the impactful, then this is something that becomes a vehicle which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can provide risk as well. Alhamdulillah. So I hope that becomes more the case. But we do,
it needs to as well.
We do need these people who can help support the dawah, because really what you're doing is if you're giving your money to help someone who is impactful have more of an impact, and that's the sadaqah jariyah, definitely, inshallah. May Allah make it easy for the dawah, and also for the people who can support.
I mean, there's a massive issue as well, is that I don't know if you guys at EFDawah have a similar issue, but with the dua, it's not just about there's a lot going on, so you'll get a lot of requests. Like my to-do list is very large, and I've got a separate to-do list of requests. So like if someone comments and says do something on this, I go, inshallah, I'll add it to my to-do list, and then I'll put it over there. And then I've got my own kind of idea of things that I want to approach. So I've got that to-do list. And then I'll get emails on top of that where it's like there's someone suffering with doubts. They have a particular issue. They want you to go through certain things. And obviously if you're spending time emailing these people, I've got a habit of rambling. So like sometimes I'll email people back like a story. There's like, wait, I get a bit caught into it. And then before I know it, like I've spent an hour writing just to this one person. Or you're like trying to figure out where to get information from, or like whether or not, you've got, say, like a non-Muslim emailing you, asking you questions about the omnipotence paradox, and then you're trying to like go through that. And there's a lot of work that goes on around it. And I guess if you're working, like I couldn't imagine how difficult it is having to do a full-time job and do all of this. Like I feel like I'm trying to dedicate myself to this 100% as much as possible, while not neglecting my wife and my daughter. And even then, I still don't feel like I have enough time in the week. I don't feel like I've got enough time in the day. I never feel like I've got enough done. So, like, subhanAllah, like I don't know how you'd manage to do that and do work at the same time. So,
I think the big strength is that people that are doing this need to get together so they can spread the load a bit, maybe. That would be a massive thing, because for example, the EFDawah Facebook page, people message it, and we've got like a handful of us that check the messages, and that we've got a blessing. I can go, that Imran could answer that question really well, and we can spread it over. Maybe something like that would be a really good thing for the dawah in the future, inshallah. You said you were going to do that with the Discord, yeah?
Inshallah. I've got a plan for a few different servers. One of them is mainly going to be like the issue is trying to like get everyone into one place without them all kind of shouting at each other as well. So I'm going to try and set something up where there's like particular etiquette in place, certain rules, only certain things are allowed to be discussed. And if there are differences, that they have to be handled in a particular way. But then it's trying to set that up and thinking of how to utilize that with other programs as well. Like I've been speaking to Farid about this, and I've still got to go into in a bit more detail with you. But utilizing things like Trello, with Discord, and there was something else, and YouTube, I guess, like where you've like set up a particular channel, and Google Docs, so Excel spreadsheets going through. Say, for example, if you want to go through like a particular anti-Islamic YouTuber, if we can get like a team of duat together, I'm talking like as many as possible, where you have spreadsheets where everyone's going through the videos, and they can mark off in the spreadsheet which video they've gone through, highlight the major points using like hashtags and keywords, and so that if someone wants to find something, they can just search the spreadsheet a particular keyword and it'll pop up with the videos. It's a bit of a grand plan, but
no, mashallah, that's excellent. I mean, that's
inshallah.
The idea of having a searchable refutation to hand whenever you sort of come across something. It's I think that's an amazing thing to do. But sort of going along with that is that obviously continuing the work that you're doing. So, Brother Farid, if I could ask you a question. So, if you've gone through two quite prominent people quite effectively, and I love the style of your very short, snappy, and very humorous sort of approach. Because I think what happens with that is not only does it highlight how the argument is false, but it actually ridicules that approach that they take. And I think what people who would come to want to make anti-Islamic videos would be hesitating to take that same style of sort of approach because of the way you've responded, mashallah, to these people. So who's next on your hit list, if we can call it that, Sean?
I don't want to mention names. I'd like to keep it as a surprise. But I think that the whole season 1, this person, season 2, that person, I think that's gonna die down. Some focus refutations to some stuff here and there, but I don't want to do like 30 videos about a person anymore. I mean, that's just too much. Unless I feel like a huge need to. But yeah, but I do agree that, and I don't know if I'd like to say it's unfortunate. I guess it is a fortunate thing. They make really incompetent mistakes to their understanding, sometimes due to language, sometimes due to the hatred, sometimes due to the darkness in their hearts. And which is why ridiculing them is so easy. And sometimes it's like, I don't have to put much of an effort into it. Like the whole Jalaluddin al-Tabari thing, the Imam Murrah thing. I'm not even like...
They make their own meme.
Yeah, they're doing it themselves, and that's why it sticks. That's why it sticks. That's why it spreads. It's not because it's something that I made. It's something they did to themselves. I'm just pointing it out, and it's funny.
Well, it's good that you have got someone planned.
Yeah, there are a few.
You don't want to give them too much of a heads up as well, though. We've talked about this, haven't we, Farid? It might set them into a panic where they run off, start deleting all of their videos, and like,
we don't want that to happen. So, like for example, with Samir and the rock solid and stuff.
Oh,
if he knew that was happening,
I know.
Stuff.
That would have been a gold mine.
Yeah.
that got nipped in the bud quite quickly.
That's a shame.
So for the people who are, say, getting into, so I've got alhamdulillah, I've got a son who's just come out of his teens, and he's been sort of watching Dawah being given probably since he was a little boy, watching me give Dawah, and they're obviously all the people his age who are obviously even slightly religious are interested in these discussions, because at their schools the discussions are primarily about atheism, because everything is taught in an atheistic way at school. Science is the way to knowledge. And then we have these things about sort of LGBTQ and lots of questions about what you think of, very basic things about homosexuality, etc. So these are things that they're discussing at school as teenagers. But people who are getting into this and trying to have these discussions, is there any advice that either of you would give, or both of you would give, to not only reverts but people who are also from a Muslim background? So let me just paint that picture a little bit. So the journey that most people I feel go through in the West is that their faith is sort of, if they're born a Muslim, they tend to have a bit of a crisis of their faith, probably quite early, probably because of the schooling system, probably by the time they're in their secondary school. And then towards the end of that, as they hit university, so when they're about 16, 17 and they're heading towards university A-levels, once they start the university, then because there's some challenge and they have to respond and rebut, their research may take them back into the religion, that was my personal journey. So I wasn't very practicing until I had people harassing me at university because I had a beard and I had a Muslim name. And then I had to suddenly realize I knew nothing. I didn't know anything at all. And in trying to find them responses, it brought me back to, alhamdulillah, brought back to the practicing life. But I think that's almost like a normal journey.
Yeah.
So there's lots of people who are sort of in that phase where they've come back to the religion. Either the religion is new and they've come back to their reverts, or they're from a Muslim background and they've come back into their religion, and now they want to maybe try and do some dawah. What would your advice be, for both of you, because I'm sure we'll get slightly different perspectives on how anybody should approach this?
Farid, you go first.
Go ahead. I still need to formulate.
Okay. Well, funnily enough, for me, it was well, you just explained there, man. That was very much, I guess, what I did with my first Muslim friends that I had, the ones who got me interested in Islam. Like, I was an atheist. They were like born and raised into a Muslim family, but they weren't very practicing to begin with. And then we would have conversations. They wouldn't know the answer to my questions. So they'd have to go away, find the answer. And then over the years, this developed their faith. And it's the major issue here is, I guess, whether or not you're a blind follower. And there's a hard balance between parents fearing their children going beyond blind faith, going to the point of tension, stressing. What's the word? Testing the structure that you've got, and it's this testing that is the thing that develops your faith in it. And so, as you've described there, man, with yourself, it wasn't until you had to deal with, say, people coming at you against your religion, and you having to look for answers. This itself is the process of building your faith over time. But what you find is the opposite, is that there's this kind of a fear of it. Why? Because obviously it leads people astray as much as it can it can increase faith, it can reduce it as well, depending on the person. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides who he wills. But I guess for me, my advice would to be, first of all, just try to focus on your intentions. Make sure you're sincere. The thing that I recall the most before I even kind of embraced Islam was I would spend time on my own really reflecting on what it was that I was after, and like making a massive emphasis to myself that I was, no matter what, I was going to find truth. I was going to aim at truth. I was going to move towards that. Whether or not I liked it, whether or not it was going to be difficult for me to accept, whether or not it was going to cause problems with friends or family, like whatever truth is, I'm moving towards it. And it was that kind of massive, sincere commitment to begin with that helped me to embrace Islam. And I guess that one of the issues here is that how do you try to convince the Muslim population that has a fear of the people that they love rightfully apostating because they've been confronted with certain things? And like we've mentioned and alluded to before, we live in the age of short attention span and laziness and impatience, because to sincerely go through this requires that you commit to it, you go to the end. Like if you've been confronted with a particular problem, because obviously this is going to definitely pop up if you're doing dawah. Especially if you're being confronted with people who already have it in their head that Islam's a bad thing. And they've heard the top 10 controversial things about Islam. If you're going to deal with this, you have to go away. You have to look into it. You have to approach it. You have to be sincere. You have to be open-minded enough to think, to what degree is me being born in this time, in this particular society, affecting how I'm looking at this problem? Is there a way of approaching this in a way that it's not necessarily as black and white. That maybe there's a lot of nuances to particular problems. Examples of that being, for example, the marriage of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to Aisha, or with mentions of slaves in the Quran, and the top, like I say, the top 10 controversial things. If you're going to be a Muslim, you have to figure out how to deal with these things, because if you don't, you're just neglecting them, and if you're just neglecting them, you're living in blind faith. And these people that live in blind faith, they're the ones that are easily toppled or easily pushed over or easily led into disbelief. And all it takes is just a sufficient amount of pressure from a group of people around them, a shame campaign or whatever. And their heart can't take it. They can't take the spotlight being on them. They can't take the pressure, and they submit and they apostate, or they leave Islam, or they commit to anti-Islamic rhetoric. Like you see with, like, for example, you don't even have to be a Muslim for this, but the EDL that develops in the UK. These people became heavily focused on anti-Islam Dawa. They weren't exactly like scholars in the field. They were just Google sheikhs. And but yeah, so it's trying to find that balance. It's trying to understand, I guess, your own limits. Trying to understand that you need to have patience when you're dealing with these problems. You're not going to find an answer just by Googling it. Like, it's not going to simply be the top search result, because this is what a lot of people do. They think truth is the first search result that Google offers. And once you found that, that's it. That's truth. And it's not.
Gone some sort of algorithm to do that. Go on, bro.
So I think what's fascinating about that, there's a couple of things that you that said before I go to Brother Farid, inshallah. So completely, ultimately, the first thing was the sincerity, and alhamdulillah, I'm glad that was the first thing that came out. All of, like you said before, our intention has to be for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I think that was absolutely amazing. The thing that intrigued me was and I hadn't really thought about this until you said it, was that there is a tension between exposure to the arguments and that affecting your faith. But actually, the counter to that is, if you're of those people who is going to be persistent to try and understand and learn, it becomes actually something that can strengthen your faith. Like a trial. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, sort of the concept. Yeah. So I think that's amazing. I think the thing that comes to mind is, I think one of the first things that, whenever I decided, okay, I'm going to try and do this, I used to go to the Speaker's Corner at the time when Abdul Rahim Green was there, which is how long ago that is, and I would just stand and watch, and sort of having heard the arguments before, but not actually speak for a very long time, because you assume you don't know enough, or you lack the confidence, or you don't have the skills to debate as other people have. So sometimes, even though the argument isn't strong against you, the way it's presented is, you don't have the skill to rebut that style.
Masters of rhetoric. Absolutely,
yeah. So these are sort of skills that sort of come with time. But Brother Farid, so if I can come to you, Brother Farid, for a moment. So from your perspective, what would you think? What would your advice be to either the revert who wants to now provide to fulfill his obligation to spread the word, or for someone, a Muslim who's now interested more in their religion and want to now maybe try and do the same? What would your advice be, inshallah?
Okay, I'm going to build off a bit on what you both said. Doc, you mentioned earlier on that for a lot of people, the existence of a response is sufficient, and that's a huge issue. That's a huge issue, because for the same people, the existence of an argument against Islam is to some degree sufficient.
SubhanAllah.
Yeah, and I have received direct messages from people freaking out about videos. Bro, please respond to this video. And I would say, did you watch the video? And they would say, no, I didn't. and it is frustrating. But the first time I realized that happens, it was a shock to me. But now I'm asking people more often, did you watch it? And I'm getting more people confirming that they haven't watched the video. They're not familiar with the argument that's being brought forward. It's just that they're the existence of the argument. Yeah, the existence of the argument itself is overwhelming. And guys, do the research, look into the argument that if it's being brought forward, double check, make sure what the person is saying to you matches what's in the text. A lot of times it won't match what's in the text. A lot of the times it's not an issue with the text, it's an issue with the understanding of the person that brought the text to you. Sometimes the issue has to do with authenticity. Unfortunately, a lot of misattributions can be found in our texts, which is why ilm al-hadith is so important. The science of hadith is extremely important. That's something I recommend everyone. That's something everyone should not just apply to when it comes to religion. They should apply to the way they conduct themselves in real life and the way they accept and filter information in real life. Think like a hadithist. It will make you believe. It'll make you stay away from falsehood and rumors and a lot of crazy stuff that you don't want to get involved with. So that's the first thing. That's the main thing. Put your time into this. The thing is, what's really interesting, I've mentioned this a couple of times in some of my last few videos, with ex-Muslims. Don't be like those ex-Muslims that don't open up the Quran ever, except when they leave Islam. After they leave Islam, now let's start studying this. Let's start examining the grammar of the Quran. Let's start examining the eloquence of the Quran. Let's start looking up whether the Quran has non-Arabic words. Let's look at these things. SubhanAllah, you're looking into this after you've left Islam. Now that you believe that there is no Jannah and Nar and you're never going to be judged, now you're going to spend this little time that you have in life to learn this book, and you didn't study it. You didn't study it back then when you believed that these are the words of God literally. You didn't care back then. So yeah, my advice to all Muslims that are interested in this is, really take it seriously. These are God's words. It's not just some random thing that you've inherited. It's something that's divine. You should really spend your time learning it in multiple ways, not just in one way. It's not just about learning the rules that are in the Quran. It's not just learning about certain aspects of it and then the history of it, but there's so much in the Quran. And eloquence itself is such a huge field. It's such a beautiful field, and we miss out on that because most of us read the Quran in a shallow manner instead of going through it in the way it's supposed to be read. And I used to not read the Quran in the way I'm trying to now. I used to read it just as a book of ahkam, just as a book of law, and that's not how it should be. The hadith are really good for law. The hadith are really good for rules, because there's a lot more, right? But the Quran, it's a miracle of eloquence, and that's why books like Zamakhshari's book and Ibn Ashur's work, their commentaries on the Quran, that's why they're so special. It's because they focus on these topics. They focus on the language more than the laws. So yeah.
That's a really good point, actually. It's quite common. That's a common thing for a Muslim to get focus on the laws and the fiqh of everything and not really look into anything else other than that. It's really common.
The connection being the important thing, and the connection is, if the person is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking to you, that's your connection, subhanallah. And to take that lightly is a very profound point you made, Brother Farid, because you do see that phenomena of these ex sort of Muslims in inverted commas who literally have never done anything to look into the religion, but afterwards they will do all of this.
Yeah.
So I think some of the advice that you were given was very interesting. So you mentioned think like a hadithist, which sort of piqued me. So do you, in your mind, do you have some? Have you? What was your? I don't know much about your background in terms of how you arrived at where you are in terms of sort of learning and these things, particularly when it comes to Islam. So if you could give a little bit of that, and just whilst you do that, are there any basic things that you think texts, or especially if they're in the English language, that we should at least have had read or gone through that would give us a good grounding in? Because hadith is one of those things that people tend to come to a bit late. They'll read the Quran and then they'll understand the Quran, maybe read a few tafsirs, and this is where their introduction to hadith tends to come.
Right.
But they're the first thing that the people who are refuting Islam tend to throw at you.
Yeah.
Right.
Because that's where a lot of the, like you said, a lot of the misattribution can be, and the situations can be presented in the way they're not quite clear. So what were the things that you would say that we should have a good understanding of? And do you have any basic books that you'd recommend for somebody to at least have looked at or read?
Really good question.
Allah barak fik, Doc. It's a very simple suggestion. So much of hadith, the vast majority of what you're looking at as a student of hadith is the trustworthiness of the person that's providing you the information, and the connection. Is the person that provided you the information connected to the previous person, or is it just some like anonymous source? And this can be applied to everything. This can be applied to even the news. Is this news outlet trustworthy? Is the person that, subhanAllah, you can apply this to anything really, in the way you perceive testimonials. And even when it comes to seeking ilm, is this sheikh that you're taking knowledge from, is he providing his reference? When you go to the Friday sermon, and I don't mean to freak people out, but sometimes the sheikh will mention a hadith and there's no reference there, and maybe you look into it, you go back home, and this hadith has no foundation. Sometimes that happens. So that's something very important to keep in mind. As for introductory texts, I always suggest a very simple introductory text, which is, and even though it's simple, there are some really profound ideas found in there, which is the introduction of Imam Muslim to his Sahih. If you have a copy of Sahih Muslim, it should have an introduction by him. I'm sure some editions probably chuck it out, though they shouldn't. But the introduction of Imam Muslim in Sahih talks about ilm al-hadith in a simple way, and so much has been written about it. There has been. You look at it and you think there's not really much there, but it really is something quite special.
Alhamdulillah, Jazakallah Khair. Brother Ponders, Yusuf, sorry, what was your degree in? Did you do a
Philosophy?
Oh, mashallah. So that explains the nihilism book, inshallah.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned the rhetoric, learning the skill of argumentation.
Yeah.
So from your perspective and from your background, is there anything you suggest that made it easier for you, that you would recommend other people to sort of have a basic idea of, or even an introductory text that you would recommend that might be useful to learn maybe how to structure arguments, or even how to, or anything else that you found that benefited you specifically in your approach to the Dawah, inshallah?
Well, YouTube is an absolutely glorious resource. There's let me see if I can find the particular one. But if you just search logic and reason on YouTube, there's a really good philosophy teacher who does a course on logic and reason, and he goes through it, and there's a whole playlist. And he also recommends a book on there. The book that I bought for uni was called Concise Guide to Logic, I think, by Kemp and Bowell. Tracy Kemp and Gary Bowell, or Tracy Bowell and Gary Kemp. If someone can confirm that in the chat, maybe. It was one of the two. But let me see if I can find this particular course. I'll tell you what, leave me with that, and I'll find it, because I've probably got it saved in my my thing. But and if I'll send it to you, and maybe you can put it in the description.
That's a great idea.
But for me, why rhetoric or understanding rhetoric is important is highlighted massively. So I did a video for you guys recently, where I was just kind of watching Christian Prince. And I didn't say anything about any of his arguments because I didn't think it was necessary. One, because there's already a lot of videos on the particular things that he was saying. My main aim was just to highlight like the man's absolutely poor etiquettes, his hypocrisy, his appeal to lying and blatantly. And that was the aim of that video. I just wanted to highlight them. And then I had a little look at the comments at one point. I had to stop because there were so many, and they just get absolutely absurd. And recently I'd watched a video with, I think it might have been you actually, Imran. Might have been the other brother, with Muhammad Ali, where you were at Speaker's Corner talking to an older gentleman about the whole adult breastfeeding thing.
This was a brother Abbas.
Abbas, yes, yeah. It probably was him. And you watch the David Wood video, and they do the same thing. Now, for me, when I first kind of approached the whole issue of this, it was like, oh, well, that's weird. Obviously, because it's the first reaction to it. It's not strange to hear that and think, oh, well, that is strange. And when you look at it, you read this thing, and it's like, right, so this woman's having an issue with her husband. Because they've got someone in their house who's like a younger man, and he's a bit paranoid about it. He's, his heart's a bit unsettled because he's not a mahram. He's not, he's not blood. He's not within the family. And so she goes to him, to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, with this concern. And keep in mind, we have this religion which is constantly critiqued for being overly conservative compared to modern standards. We have huge standards of etiquettes in terms of the aura, where there's massive parts of the female body that are not allowed to be shown. And this is one of the major things that are constantly being brought up about Islam, about how strict it is, about the fact that women can't be on their own with non-mahrams. And then you think about this, and then you hear that he says to her, and correct me if I'm wrong, Farid, you're the Arabic speaker here, but the word that's used for suckling can be meant indirectly or directly. So the Arabic itself, you can use the same word if you're giving someone milk from a bottle. Yeah. So it's not specific to suckling on the woman, with skin contact. So the word itself is very vague. And if you speak Arabic, which Christian Prince does, you have to be aware of that ambiguity. Now, obviously, you look at the story here. You have this woman approaches the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam with this concern. He uses this word, which is quite ambiguous, and she says, "How can you expect me to suckle him? He's an adult." And then the Prophet laughs. Now, if you take into context or if you understand the idea that Islam is one of the most conservative religions going, like it has strict rulings on etiquette, and the Prophet laughs. And to me, when I heard that, it's like, obviously he's laughing because she didn't pick up on the way he meant that word. She's not noticed its ambiguity. The first thing that's popped into her head is, say, that the suckling you would do with a child, and not the other use of the word where you could put it into a bottle or into a cup and give it to that person. And if you look at David Wood's video on this, where he's using rhetoric here, and David Wood is a master at rhetoric. Like he's a philosophy. Is he a PhD in philosophy? So
I'm not sure about PhD. But
he's got a master's, or it's one of them. It's above graduate anyway. So he's aware of all this. He's aware of how you present an argument is enough to be compelling to, say, the layman. And what he does is he emphasizes on this laugh, and he paints this picture in the person's head. He's like, the creepiest laugh you've ever seen. Like, and he puts emphasis on that, and he completely reconfigures how you see this story. It turns from something innocent, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is laughing at the fact that this woman's misunderstood what he said. Obviously, he didn't mean it in in a direct sense, where she would have to have direct suckling with a young man, for a number of reasons. One, he's not a mahram. Two, like, you can't show your aura to anyone. Like, and when you these are rules, this is like commanded within Islam. You can't break any going beyond that is haram. And if you understand that that's haram, you understand then that the word suckling here is meant in the indirect sense, not the direct sense, because the direct means to do a lot of things that have already been forbidden. And so it's obvious what he meant. And it's obvious that the laugh was a playful one, like, oh, you've misunderstood me. That's obviously not what I meant. Like, go in private, put the milk into a bowl, give it to him. And then you can see this by the fact that, the husband was... his heart was settled on the issue after this. And that doesn't make sense if he did the opposite thing. If he's worried about the fact that there's this non-mahram in the house with his wife and blah, 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 why on earth would it make more sense to suggest that direct suckling resolves that issue and not make it worse? When from the context of the story, it doesn't seem obvious that he even knows that his wife spoke to the Prophet about this problem either. So, but this is a thing. This is rhetoric, and this is what CP is doing in the video that I'm commenting on. And I guess it was stupid of me to think that it was completely obvious what he was doing, and so not to comment on it. But subhanAllah, it just goes completely over people's heads. Like, and these are the same people that will 1 minute complain that Islam is too conservative, Islam is too strict in terms of the rulings with mahrams, with awra, and then completely, I don't know whether it's consciously or unconsciously, purposely or not, they forget that they ever make these arguments, and then all of a sudden Islam becomes this weird hippie religion where grown men can suckle on non-mothers, people that are not the mother. And so this is rhetoric. This is, and when you see it, it's clear. And if any of you could go and watch any of these videos again, and you see how their use of language shapes their argument, how it paints, it makes, they're forcing you to picture the Prophet laughing in a creepy way, and he's like, creepiest, and he's emphasizing it. That all of this affects how you hear the argument. Now, if you're trained in that, you spot it a mile off. If you've studied philosophy, if you've studied logic, if you've studied reason, rhetoric, you can see when this is occurring. You can see when someone's being ingenuine, and you can see when they're just trying to lead you to like accepting a particular thing that they don't. His mission is simply bastardize Islam. His mission is to get you to hate it, to get you to see it as evil, to see it as as blasphemy, as something that you need to run away from. And I very much get the impression from a lot of these people, CP being one, David Wood being the other, and I could list countless of them, where this is the goal to the extent that they really are not bothered about how they achieve that goal.
100%.
And and they go all out with their mastery of rhetoric. And
you'd be surprised, Yusuf. I mentioned the videos that I made 12, 13 years ago. They were on this very topic. Subhanallah. So this is something that it just does the rounds. It just keeps coming around.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember at the time, and this is think back over a decade, but there's a hadith where I think it's Salama, may God be pleased with her, who was one of the wives of Prophet peace be upon him, who says that this event was an exception. Specifically this son who'd grown up with this woman in her household before this concept of mahram and non-mahram had, become clear in the religion. So he was in this grey area where she had raised him as a son, and now suddenly, okay, there's no such thing as actually adoption. You have to, this is someone who would be a non-mahram for you, and her husband was upset with this. So we have a clarification of the event, and that the fact this is an exception just for I think there's the Sahaba's name was Salim. I can't remember the full, but
Salim Mawla Abi Hudayfa.
Subhanallah, Jazakallah Khair. So the evidence is even there that it's an exception, and so it's not a generalized everyone can go ahead and do this. But the way that it's presented is you'll get lots of links to different readings of the same hadith to make it seem as if many people were given this concession. This not concession, but this ruling. But it's only for one person.
Yeah.
Ever only for one person. That's probably the thing to highlight it. And we have the hadith that says that this was simply that, and the Prophet's wives, may Allah be pleased with them, all said that this was not something they would consider to be allowed, except for this one case where the Prophet, peace be upon him, allowed it. But so your point really about learning the rhetoric and recognizing the character, making a caricature out of what the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was is a key thing to understanding argumentation. So Jazakallah Khair, I appreciate that insight from both of you. Alhamdulillah.
No problem.
I think one big thing that they do is they create a narrative, a picture, a story. So they're telling you, like someone that doesn't know much about the religion, they'll tell you about this horrible warlord, and they'll tell this story, and then they'll select a obscure or cut down hadith or a weak hadith and go, see, look, and then it backs up, and that story becomes a reality, and people go around thinking that's what Islam is. So like that's the big tactic. I see it everywhere, and that's what I feel needs to be smashed away. And I think good thing people could do that are in apologetics is the opposite, and show the narrative of the real personality of the Prophet, peace upon him, as well, rather than just refuting what other people say about him.
It's getting worrying as well, because I've noticed the growing trend of even like, because there are Christian apologetics individuals that are involved in that anyway, that I've previously respected. I've enjoyed their work, watching it, despite not agreeing with the majority of the things they put forward. And even these people that I've respected have gone on to kind of collaborating and doing work with characters like David Wood, like Sam Shimon. And this is what I find worrying. William Lane Craig did a video with David Wood, and I was watching the video of him doing a critique on, I can't remember which, whether it was one of the du'at from, I can't remember when, and the things that he was critiquing about this brother, they were applicable to the fact that he was sat in that room with David Wood. He's going on about, they're basically saying, this individual is misrepresenting Christianity, and he's referring to them as slimy and slippery and snaky.
Wow.
They're using this language that has like satanic connotations to it, and even with brothers as may Allah bless him, Shabir Ali, like he's the most pleasant dua out there. And they're still trying to like shape him as if he's some sort of slippery, slimy character. Yeah. And this is William Lane Craig, a massively respected person in academia, sitting with David Wood, talking about how Muslims misrepresent Christianity and this, that, and the other, and how bad it is, and blah 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 blah. And like during the whole video, I was just watching. I was like, I could sit here with someone now and do the exact. I could just reel off their script about what they're doing now. SubhanAllah. And then recently as well, that there's other Christian YouTuber. He's a much smaller channel. What's his name? Well, he recently did one with David Wood as well. What's his name now? My memory is absolutely terrible. It annoys me.
Don't give him the hits, bro.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, no worries.
I'll tell you what, guys. I'm looking at the time. Mashallah, it's gone really quick. So I thought I would read out some questions that the comments have asked to give them a bit, and then I think we should wrap up, inshallah. So one person asked, how important do you think it is to have live public debate? Do you think online refutations are sufficient enough these days, or is it really important to do the live, like, you know, the David Wordverse or Hannah Hijab style?
I would like to comment on something that you said, Ben, before that. I truly agree with. It's how these guys come up with their narratives about what Islam is supposed to be and what Rasulullah is supposed to be. And it's interesting because they're making, a lot of them are making it up as they go along. And you can clearly see that if you've been following their content for long enough. And sometimes the narrative changes a week later, sometimes on the same day. A couple of examples that come to mind, truly enjoyable, and catching the stuff, and truly sad to see. For example, Christian Prince was arguing that Rasulullah was this sex maniac, right? And he tries to push that narrative all the time. And in one report, it says that Rasulullah was bewitched, and then he changed the narrative completely. So he's like, actually, he never had sex, and he could not perform. He could not perform at all. And that's, you know, trying to attack his manliness. I don't know.
It's any attack, any angle, really, isn't it?
Anything and everything.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if it's conflicting at this point. And this highlights why it's rhetoric. It's got nothing to do with truth. It's got to do with just pushing you to see him in a particular light.
In another video, he argues that, you guys familiar with the hadith where the companions were standing in line and they were preparing for battle, and one of them was like out of line, so the Prophet, peace be upon him, basically poked him in the stomach, and then he said, "Let me poke you." Are you guys familiar with that report?
Yeah.
So the way Sifu manipulates that, he says, look at this man, how he takes off his clothes for the other person to touch him and stuff like that, and this is extremely messed up. How you're supposed to cover up, and all of a sudden he's taking off his shirt so this man could basically touch him and whatnot. And in another video, he's trying to argue that the Prophet, peace be upon him, is a homosexual. All right, and he's saying that the other man took off his clothes or pulled up his shirt, and the Prophet started to kiss him.
It's all sorts, isn't it? Subhanallah.
Same hadith that he's flipping who's doing the hugging and who's doing the pulling the shirt up.
But it's important to note here that again, this issue with short attention spans, people aren't. There was one guy in some interview, I won't mention his name, but he was like, I've read 30 books in 1 week. You know, I'm the most intelligent person in the entire planet. And then I was like, 30 books in 1 week? And I was like, how many books is this a day? So I got the calculator. I was like, four books a day. Like, let's say he sleeps for 6 hours. So 18 hours in a day. Say he does nothing but read. That's 1 book every 4 hours. Like, I've been doing a reading club on Discord, and we've been going through 1 book, and it's taken us weeks to get through it. Like, hours and hours and hours and hours. I couldn't imagine having read through this in 4 hours. And it's this idea of like quantity over quality. Like, they think there's just simply reading as much as possible. I doubt he even read 30 books at all, but let's say he did. But how much of that has he absorbed? Like, how much of that has he actually understood, battled with, thought about? Like, if you're reading 4 books a day, over 4 books a day, you're not spending much time thinking about what you've read in that book. You're literally just going over the words.
these religious books, or maybe he read the manga or something.
Oh, it was Biff,
The
Chip
Mr.
and
Men
Kipper.
titles, were they?
Yeah, where's Wally? Something like that. But it's the same thing with these Christian Prince videos. Like, people aren't watching them and absorbing the information. They're watching them as entertainment. They're watching them as, oh, I'm watching this guy get ruined, destroyed, battled. Yeah, mate, he's getting killed here. And they're not paying any attention to the structure of the argument, the information that's being given. They'll latch onto something that was memorable simply because it was like a pawning moment. Like, it was like, oh, that person got proper embarrassed then. And so that argument sticks. But they're not thinking about it, because, you know, it's impossible, because he stood there with his shotgun. He just back like one after the other. He keeps swapping, flip-flopping, changing conversation. Like, he's constantly interrupting. He'll say, oh, and, you know, this is the kind of thing I was highlighting in the video I did for you guys. And this isn't the kind of resource you go to if you actually want to learn about a subject matter. That is the worst place to go. If you're inclining to this kind of thing, you're inclining to it for entertainment purposes, and not because you take academia seriously, not because you wanting to learn sincerely. You know, if you want to learn sincerely, you go to books. You go like, if I want to learn about you know, the shape of the earth being, how we know it's round, and so on and so forth, I don't go and pick up books written by flat earthers. Like, I don't go straight to the person who hates the view. If I want to understand Islam, I should be going to the Quran. I should be going to the people that fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and fear Judgment Day, and fear the consequence of lying about the religion. And, you know, that's where you're going to find out about Islam in its true, sincere form. Not from someone who has no fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, has no fear of, you know, changing and misshaping and misforming the image of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or of the Sahaba, or any of this. Because they've got no fear of God in them. Why would they be motivated to make sure what they're presenting to you is 100% the truth with regard to Islam? Yeah, whereas, you know, a scholar who's dedicated his entire life to Islam, who is, you can tell just by like how much time he's invested in it, you know, his etiquettes, how he behaves. You can see that he fears Allah, and you can see that if he thinks that if he changed, or if he lies about the religion, that, you know, that's him in the hellfire for it. What motivation has he got to lie to you? What, you know, if he fears Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala more than he fears the judgment of people, surely it makes sense to take your information about that religion from him, and not from David Wood, who's a master rhetorician, or from CP, who's, you know, the Captain Clown. These are the things people are not considering, and this is why, you know, studying rhetoric, studying logic, not simply for the sake of using it yourself, but for seeing it when it's there, for like noticing it when it's being sent your way. Because what I'm often surprised by is, even though I can see the rhetoric, even though I can see the technique, I still find myself like being, oh wow, this is a really good argument, even though I don't like end up agreeing with the conclusions, just because of how they've presented it. There's a danger in that, and obviously if you're a layman, this is where picking your battles or understanding your limits, because it's all good. Like we've been telling you, make sure you get your foundations, make sure like you're not lazy, make sure you look into it. You know, if you're going to do dawah, check the resources and commit to it. Go to the end. Don't stop halfway and think you've figured it out, or think that, oh well, that'll do. Like, no, you've got to be vigorous with it. But you still need like other foundations before you can even do that. So you need to look into logic. You need to understand what fallacies are. You need to understand a lot of things, and it requires patience. And there was another thing as well. Like a lot of the ulema, Smile to Jenna pointed this out recently, because there was a critique of Mufti Menk by some random layman, And he was pointing out, listen, a lot of the ulama would spend 20 years learning manners, etiquettes, before they even went into knowledge. Subhanallah.
This reminds me of a question actually. It was asked. It is a little bit off the topic of apologetics, where it could be the same. But what's a good way to do dawah to your peers? You know, workplace, uni, friends, family, without like seeming self-righteous. You know, what's a good way of doing dawah apart from having that good character? What would you advise someone to do and look up and educate themselves on, or just actively do from what they already know?
You go first, Farid.
No experience, like barely any experience. I mean, like Muslim, non-Muslim dawah. But yeah, like if it's Muslim to Muslim.
I think it was a Muslim that asked that. So I think. So maybe their intention is like giving dawah to their non-practicing friends, or bringing their family to maybe a practice of Islam that's not Islamic. You know, bringing them back to the Djinn sort of thing. How would you approach that?
As weird as it sounds, I know it's quite cliche, but being yourself rubs off on people, and I've been told that. Not even doing direct dawah to someone, just being yourself truly rubs off on people. But I mean, Muslims, right? For a Muslim to rub off on Muslims, just being yourself and avoiding haram and sticking to obligations and whatnot, and just being yourself. However, I'm sure there are better ways, but I mean, just being yourself truly does help. I do believe. As for Muslim to non-Muslim, I'll leave that for you guys.
Yeah.
You guys.
What about you, Imran? What would you get? I think you've got a good approach.
Alhamdulillah, I think the what Brother Farid said actually is actually the way, is to have the conviction, the courage to adhere to your religion with other people around. And when so for example, there have been many scenarios where, for example, there's a work gathering, like they're going to go for a meal, and I've said, okay, I'll join, inshallah. And later on, I found out sort of when the poster's gone up, like this is a bar, or it's and so, and the person's organised, it happens to be the Muslim manager of this environment, as they've just organised, and without the thinking of this, and I've just said, I'm sorry, I can't come to this, and they're surprised. Why is that? I said, well, I looked it up online, and it's a bar. And what happens then is that two things happen. There's that the person who I'm speaking to happens to be a Muslim. It dawns on them, oh gosh, I didn't think of this, even to check. I just thought it was a famous restaurant, etc. And so it's made them more aware of that, and it's had an impact on them that I have to think, maybe more about this. But the other people that you interact with, who are the non-Muslims, they say, it opens that door. Some of them who are close to you may ask you questions. Others will just go away and maybe think about it. I was about to say ponders, but maybe go away and think about it. And so after a while, it does rub off on people. And I've had sort of scenarios where I've found that people tend to trust you because they see you do certain things or have certain actions where you won't take an advantage of a situation where there's some gain for you, simply because it's unethical from your religious perspective to do that.
Yeah.
And it becomes apparent in the way you've gone about it. Maybe even if, look, I'm going to leave this pen at work because it's not my pen. I've got simple things like this, where if something isn't yours, you will use it for that purpose because it's work, but you won't take it home. Whereas people will just pocket a pen or whatever, and they'll just leave the building. Yeah. And it's not yours. You haven't taken it. And those little tiny things eventually build up, and you don't know where the seed that is planted will bear fruit. The longest distance I've seen, in my experience, I saw a gentleman who was 85 when he became a Muslim. The first encounter he had with Muslims was when he was in his 25. So this was 60 years prior, and it took his journey was 60 years. Subhanallah. But the thing that in the end, when I asked him what was the thing that affected you, he harked back to that experience. When I was 25, I was in India, and my servants used to go and pray, and I knew that at certain times of the day I couldn't disturb them. But he was too young and arrogant then. But 60 years later, that thing was the thing that brought him, subhanAllah, to learn more. And
it's really
so
common.
it is that rubbing off, and you don't know when it's going to rub off.
Yeah.
But if you adhere to your principles and stick to your convictions and have the courage to be a Muslim confidently in whichever environment you're in, inshallah, that has an impact.
It does. If I go back to my experience, exactly that. I mean, I can look at the stepping stones Allah put in my life to bring me to the decision to accept Islam, and they're just little, like interaction with one of my first jobs was there was a Muslim working there and stuff, and little bits and bobs. And I remember the time where I stopped. I had a period where I accepted Islam, stopped practicing, and started practicing again. And then in my workplace, I was sharing a building with a different business, and we shared the corridor. And I was walking through to take the rubbish out, and there was a brother praying there, and it just put guilt into me. And that was the stepping stone for me to start practicing again. It took like months and months, but subhanAllah, that is amazing. 25 years old, and then 85 accepts Islam. I think one of the big things I would give advice to, and not like I've done loads of dawah to work colleagues and stuff, but I think what's really, really important is the two things: not to be too preachy about your beliefs. Oh well, we believe this, but also to be really approachable. So what I found is when people ask me about Islam, they get really awkward and worried and tactical in what they're saying. They don't want to offend you, and they'll go, "Well, I just want it. Do all the women have to cover their head?" and they're really worried. And it's like, yeah. Because I remember when my work colleagues saw my wife, and then saw her sister, and the sister wasn't wearing a hijab, and he was confused. He didn't know what is she a Muslim? And and he didn't want to. You need to be really open and make jokes and stuff. Yeah, it's fine, man. And be really open, so that person will keep coming with questions.
That's definitely Sorry, I didn't mean to jump in.
No, that was it. I think being really open and cool, and still your own personality. Because one thing I see with sometimes with reverts is their personality changes into this emotionless, rigid, talks like the people that do debate, not debates, like lectures. Talk like the people who do lectures, for example, Islamic lectures. They start talking this robotic way, like they never really used to talk before. Yanni, like, what are you doing? You talk to English bloke that you work with. Just be yourself still. It doesn't change. Islam doesn't make you a different personality. It enriches your personality. That would be my advice.
Mine would be the worst thing you can do is make people feel guilty for not knowing something about Islam, or for not knowing a certain practice, and for me it's always been massively important. Like if someone says something and it's like, well, I can't really do that, you'll see that this, like you said, this guilt might come over them, and like, oh, sorry, I didn't know. It's like, well, you wouldn't know. Why would you know? You're not Muslim. And like emphasize like not letting them feel bad about not knowing something about Islam, and not making them feel stupid about not knowing something, because people find, and the best thing as well is allowing them to ask the controversial things. So that for me, this was one of the biggest things that impacted me when I was a non-Muslim dealing with Muslims, was that I always felt on edge asking. It's like, well, should I talk about Aisha, or am I going to make them feel uncomfortable? And some people don't care. Some people, you watch Speaker's Corner ones, they just run at them and go, Aisha was however old, and like, they're tactless about it. But not everyone's like that. Some people, they have etiquettes. They fear embarrassing you. They fear making things awkward. And just like allowing them that space to like ask the awkward question.
Yeah.
And say, like, I get it. Like, you're from the secular West. You were born and raised here. Certain things are strange to you, just as they are strange to everyone in your society. It would be strange if you didn't find them strange. It's fine. Ask it. And yeah, it's an awkward question. You might not even know the answer. Like the brothers I was talking to, subhanAllah, they weren't people of knowledge. They weren't like massively clued up on absolutely everything in Islam. but they gave me the space to ask the awkward questions. And when they didn't know the answer, they didn't feel embarrassed about just saying, I don't know. Leave it with me. It's a good question. Makes sense. I can see why you might want to ask that. But let me go find out. I'll write it down and then we'll bring it up next time. And then they did. They'd go away. They'd look it up. They'd talk about it to other people. They'd get some answers. They'd write them down. They'd bring them. They'd talk to me about them again. They wouldn't just let it float off into the ether. And they'd bring it up. They'd say, "Oh, last time we spoke, you mentioned this." Well, I went and looked into it. So these are a number of things that people have come up with. I don't know whether they're right or not, but we can discuss them. And then they would talk to me about. And that, subhanAllah, that was probably one of the best things about these particular brothers. It was just how chilled they were, and they weren't. Yeah, they weren't ashamed. They weren't. They weren't embarrassed. They weren't any of this. Like, it was just that they were sincere people. Yeah, confident. Because it's the whole process of osmosis. If you're not rubbing off on people, they're rubbing off on you. It's that the hadith about the blacksmith and the musk salesman. And so, if, for example, Imran, you didn't stand up in that particular example you gave and say, "Well, I can't go there. That's a bar." You're indirectly justifying it to the person that arranged that, and then they're not going to feel so guilty about that, and it just becomes something peripheral, a non-issue, something they don't have to think about. And something normal, and simply saying no, not feeling embarrassed about it, but not trying to make other people feel guilty, not trying to be this overzealous, that's haram, how dare you, and do a whole song and a dance about it, and a shame campaign, and start a hashtag trending on Twitter. How dare this person try to do this? Just simply being chilled about it is enough to have a massively positive impact on people. And then the only other thing that I absolutely love about Muslims, especially when I was a non-Muslim, and it was something that would make me nearly cry sometimes, was how eager they were to pay for meals and how I'd have to fight them for the bill. SubhanAllah, this was the supreme. This was the complete opposite of what I was used to. I was raised with people that when we were in school, in high school, everyone used to smoke. We used to buy cigarettes for 50p. And there was a really weird thing about this, where if you had a cigarette, you didn't have a cigarette. You had half a cigarette, and then 50 people had the other half. And everyone took account for who owed who what part of what cigarette. So it was like, oh, you'd light up a cigarette, and the first thing you'd hear is 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s, 7s, which is representative of the fraction of the cigarette they want to claim. So someone wants a half, someone else wants a third, someone else wants a fourth, and then everyone's taking account of who owes what. It's yeah, I saved you a tenth of a cigarette. Yeah. You owe me a tenth. You need to give me that back. And if someone buys you food, the first thing they're doing is they're holding it above your head. Oh, come on, lad. I bought you that meal yesterday. You need to sort me out. For me, it was very rare that people would ever do anything without expecting it back, without expecting to be able to hold it against you at some point. And with Muslims, that was never the case. And that alone was... I can't even describe the feeling. It had a massive impact. Just how they would fight you to pay the bill, and they'd take no prisoners. They'd push you out of the way, just to make sure, and they'd get angry if you insisted on trying to pay. And then they would never mention it again. And then the next time there was a meal, the same thing. And for me, with this particular group of brothers, it was I never got the opportunity to pay for anything, and then I had to flip one day and say, no, you've
let me do it.
Let me pay the bill. It's silly now. We've been out for 20 meals, and I've never paid once. For my own heart, please just let me pay for something, even if it's just this once. And you have to beg and grovel just for the opportunity to pay for a meal. But subhanAllah, that kind of high etiquette, and not being pushy, not making people feel guilty, not being zealous. All of these things, and just being confident, being yourself, and not feeling embarrassed or required to give up on something simply because everyone around you is like, they might look at you, there might be a spotlight on you for a second, like, oh, he's a Muslim, we're all drinking alcohol.
I think that's a really good. It's a really good message to give to the 255 people watching. So think about that, and how you can implement that in your lives. That is easy as following the sunnah of the Prophet, peace upon him, could stick in a non-Muslim's mind, and maybe inshallah 10 years later they're a Muslim because you started that fire, you started that bits and bobs will happen through their life which bring them closer to become a Muslim. It's not just about debating. Oh, what do you believe? Oh, you're an atheist. Well, actually, and you don't want to do that. Just be.
You're wrong.
Yeah, you're wrong. Don't do a Hamza. No, Hamza's good at what he does, mashallah.
Yeah,
so unfortunately, we're going to have to end it now because although if this was Jordan M's channel, we'd be still talking. It'd be like a 6-hour stream, but we're going to try and keep these short. I just wanted to thank you guys so much for coming on, mashallah. That was awesome. It was awesome. And I want to mention a few things before we go. I want to. What was it? There we go. Tomorrow we got a live stream with Hamza and Ijaz. Are you on there as well, Imran?
Yeah, inshallah, I'll be there as well.
Inshallah. So that one is the where is it? It's the crucifixion one, isn't it?
Yeah, part 4.
I like the title,
Part 4.
by the way.
Yeah,
Crucifixion or crucifixion. Who came up with that one?
I think Ahmed Didat came up with that one in a booklet about 30 years. Yeah, it's alhamdulillah.
It's really good.
Mashallah. So also I wanted to mention that a couple of days ago we did a video about us like promoting our Patreon page. We don't normally ask for donations really, but I just want to say thank you. Jazakallah Khair. May Allah reward everyone that actually donated to that. Also, I reckon you guys should go on to next. There's IERA doing a live stream. Hopefully they're still doing it. Because IERA are a big, there's Abdurrahim Green on it. IERA are a big Dawa organization throughout all the world, but their live streams are 38 people watching. So come on, I know we're good at what we do, but pop over there and support those guys, inshallah. They're really good quality live streams. And
really good brothers as well involved.
Yeah, really good. I mean, they've helped me a lot as well. So yeah, alhamdulillah. I think that's it. Is there anything else, Imran, that we need to plug?
I think just to reiterate, Jazakallah Khair to both of the brothers, Brother Farid and Brother Yusuf. May Allah increase you. And don't underestimate when the times are tough and there's a struggle with trying to work through a particular argument. Don't underestimate the barakah that Allah puts in your work and the effect that it has on the people. May Allah increase you. And Jazakallah Khair for all your advice today. We appreciate that.
And for you guys as well. Jazakallah Khair for having us.
EFDawah, huge platform. Barakallah fikum. You guys, huge effect on communities all around the world. May Allah reward you, especially in this month.
Ameen. Big up the live streams.
Pa.
Right, we're off. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam.